This is the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
This morning, we're going to be taking a fascinating ride, quite literally, through church history with a unique lens, papal transportation. We're talking about from the days of the portable throne to sleek electric vehicles. The way that popes have moved through the world tells a story not only of technology, but also of humility, accessibility, and the evolving papal ministry. Joining us live is our spiritual director, Father Marcel Taillon, who recently visited Castel Gandolfo, the historic summer residence of the popes, where he got a firsthand look at 9 different vehicles used by the Holy Fathers over the decades. Father Taillon is the pastor of St. Thomas More Parish in Narragansett, Rhode Island, and a longtime Relevant Radio and Morning Air contributor. Good morning, Father Taillon. Thanks so much for joining us. It's a joy to be with you once again.
Well, it's great to be here, and it's a fun, interesting topic, isn't it? That we think of our own lives, we think of our grandparents, great-grandparents on horse-drawn carriages back in the days, some generations ago, and obviously the advent of the car changed the way we, and now today with Uber and making taxis go away, and there's always this transformation in transportation, and the popes are not exempt from that. Of course, there's different things that happen, but it's a fascinating thing to see the development. There are certainly, again, I was so surprised. I went out to Castel Gandolfo recently after Pope Francis's funeral, the day after, and that's open. We were able to go through John Paul's apartment. But the one thing that stunned me was in the courtyard, they did have these 9 vehicles, and they were probably from the 70s and 80s, and one of them sort of John Paul II had used one. It looked like the JFK car in Dallas, kind of that kind of thing, black and looking like that. There were other different things that have transported the Pope. One kind of looked like a golf cart, not really a Pope-mobile, what we call today, but things in between. And then there were different cars used by the popes on trips to the United States or other places that had special, obviously, bulletproof glass, but also very open air at times to be able to be seen, but to be safe and to also to move. The Pope has to move quite a bit. You think of how many thousands and thousands of souls, probably the most visited seen person in the world is the Pope of any world leader. It's no one else gets 200,000 people on their first foray into any area, which is what Pope Leo received last week. So it's fascinating to see that these horse-drawn carriages, and of course, before that, there used to be these, obviously they would carry them on these chairs, these thrones, we'd call them, throughout the square, and then this advent, this total change of everything, and it was good to see Pope Leo on this kind of this vehicle. It's by Mercedes-Benz. It was made specifically for the Pope to get him around the square, and as you know, it's a regular event on Wednesday audiences, sometimes papal masses on Sundays, and people want to be able to see the Holy Father, to feel close to him, feel close to Peter, but also to receive blessings. And it just, obviously, he's our pastor, our shepherd, so we want to be close to our Father, and that's what these vehicles do. So it's very interesting. It's colorful. There's a history to them. It's always evolving, and I'm sure as different papacies have different goals in getting to people, but one of the main things is the Pope needs transportation in his own country, really, in the Vatican. So we see that kind of playing out now with Pope Leo, and I think it was so exhilarating to see him going around the Conciliazione. It's called that road before the Vatican, and then around the square. And just it makes people able to be close to him. Sometimes he'll embrace a baby or someone who's disabled, and that's also very moving. That wouldn't happen unless he was moving around kind of rapidly on these vehicles, and it's a beautiful thing. So it's interesting to take note of that today, I think, in light of the new Pope and all that's happened to him. But again, so many things. Oftentimes, a company will obviously gift something to the Vatican, to the papacy, with regard to this. I know back in 1929, there was an American, Graham Page, who gave a gift, this kind of old, like what we'd call a jalopy or an antique car, given. These were the first ones kind of gifted over to the Pope, where he had a special seat and things like that. So it's just fascinating. It's a fascinating thing to reflect on. If anyone gets out to Castel Gandolfo, it's outside Rome. You can visit there. Then you go right up to the cars pretty much and see it. And I do know, I have years ago inside the Vatican downstairs, they have the papal carriages when it was horse and carriage, and some are very ornate from like the Middle Ages are there, and it's just fascinating to see the evolution. Leo took his name, Pope Leo, for rerum novarum, the Industrial Revolution. How that played out over 100 years ago, and then AI, I know, is on the Holy Father's mind, what is being drawn to Leo's document and time period, but we see a little bit in sense, AI it's going to affect our transportation. Everything else is kind of rapidly so evolving, and we see that happen also in what's moving the Pope around.
I find it fascinating that he's traveling. In fact, for the Wednesday audience, he was in his papal vehicle, and it's open air. He's obviously trusting in God's providence that nothing bad is going to happen, along with all of his bodyguards and the security people that travel along as he's making his way through the square. But we have to remember that in that very same square, there's a marker where we remember where Pope St. John Paul II was shot by Aliaja back in 1981. And so obviously things changed a little bit after that, much more secure, covered. JPII and Pope Benedict used as well.
Yeah, so sometimes they're kind of encased in glass, right, especially when they're going to these huge World Youth Day events and stuff. I'm sure it's partially for the elements, but more even for security. You bring up a good point. And, I was in the square even at Pope Francis's funeral, and it does cross your mind as helicopters, drones kind of doing all this, and there's these guards running up and down. I'm sure lots of undercover and things. But Muhammad Ali Aja did get a shot, and you think of 200,000 people and all these rooftops. So it's a world we live in today. It's very violent, perhaps. But I did notice that Pope Leo was just out there without glass, and I saw that. And please God, we have the shield of the Holy Spirit, but these kind of vehicles can also give him protection. So hopefully they'll work all that out and keep the Holy Father safe, but visible and available. So that's where's that line between availability and being interactive, touching the Pope, and being able to really see him, and then I think obviously the touch and the closeness is part of the experience that people love when his successor Peter can be literally touched or seen and without anything. But you're right. I mean, the security, I'm sure, is and it should be a major component in how they design these things and how he's going to move forward with all this. It is. I'm sure it's a challenge today, and where's that balance? It's a fine line, and I'm sure it's one the Holy Father himself has to sort of decide.
Well, Father Taillon, this is a fascinating topic, of course, because so much has happened over the last 2 centuries with the development of these papal vehicles. I find it super interesting as I was doing a little homework myself that back in 2002, Pope John Paul II said that the term Pope-mobile was undignified. Now, these are the words of the Holy Father, and he asked Catholics to stop using it. In other words, quit calling them Pope-mobiles, because, someone went on to say that it was, kind of like calling it like the Batmobile. It just wasn't, dignified. So I think the suggestion is that we should call it the papal vehicle. That's why, if you've heard me say that, it's because I was trying to be obedient to JP2.
No, that's right, and it is kind of a yeah. It's not the biggest thing to die on the hill for, but it is kind of sounds a little too casual perhaps. And today, there's so many acronyms and fun little things we do with everything in life. But yeah, I think John Paul II thought that wasn't the best, but it is funny. I don't know what you call it. There's names in Latin for everything. I think. They had a Latin name for the throne and other Latin names, but I don't know if we can get something in Latin to stick that's a little more serious, but sounds playful maybe or something. I don't know. I'd have to do a little research on the etymology of that, but it's going to be hard to change people's using that because it's so people sort of, I think it's an affectionate term for secular people and people, they don't mean anything derogatory, but you're right, John Paul didn't want that used. At some point he did say that. I did read that. So maybe we can come up with something. We can have a contest on Relevant Radio during the next fund drive, and we'll have votes or something. People can come up with something better that we can all use.
Well, one other point that I thought is interesting, when you look back at the history of these vehicles, even before there were actually automobiles, the successor of St. Peter were carried around in these portable thrones for centuries. In fact, there's a picture of one from Pope Pius VII from in the early 1800s, and it reminded me that the only reason that we even have that is because the Pope is the successor of the Apostle St. Peter, and it is the chair of Peter, the authority of Peter that is symbolized in any of whether it's the chair or even the Pope-mobile. He's There I am calling it the Pope-mobile.
Well, no, I think it's right. Maybe we could do a show one morning on the importance of furniture in the church and theology, right? So the chair of Peter, there is a chair. If you go in St. Peter's, there's a chair up on the back wall being held up by the fathers of the church. And tradition has it that the chair of Peter, the wooden chair, is inside that chair. It's reverence on the chair of Peter. They put candles on it on February 22nd, and only the Pope can sit in the cathedra in his chair. We had a new bishop yesterday in Providence. He got part of the ritual was he was brought to the chair, and then only he can sit in the cathedra, which is the cathedral's name for this. If you have a cathedral in your diocese, it's named for the chair. It's named for the furniture, and of course it denotes apostolic authority, successors to the apostles, and of all apostles, Pope Leo succeeded St. Peter as the Bishop of Rome and takes that chair at St. John Lateran. So his cathedra is in St. John Lateran, not in St. Peter's. But you're right to say, so the chair is very, very important in Catholicism, and it's important as a teaching. Sometimes we note the Pope will teach sitting down, which is the chair is kind of a symbol of the Pope's chair is different than all the other chairs. Whenever he goes somewhere, people design chairs it symbolizes Peter's authority, the vicar of Christ on earth. So it's very important. The furniture speaks to us of what we believe in our tradition and the respect and the honor we give to someone placed in authority by Jesus Christ. We do this in dioceses and even in churches. The priest, what we call the presider, has to have a chair a little bit different and sometimes a bit different than everybody else. When you go to a church, look at the priest chair's a little different than the other chairs, even in the sanctuary. And it's kind of a little game you can play, but it's helpful. I think it's a helpful thing, but that's why where the Pope sits, and in modernity, these vehicles, these papal vehicles, I will call them, they change to be modernized, but there's still it's a place for him to sit, to teach, and to be seen and to interact. So it's fascinating to someone could do probably a whole film and documentary on papal transportation and its evolution, how it reflects society, and I'm sure we'll see more of it in this papacy. And it's we just want to keep the Pope safe, but also available. And remember that the chair in St. Peter's, the chair in any cathedral, the cathedra is a blessing to us as Catholics. We're blessed to have apostolic authority in the church. That's what distinguishes us from other faiths in a major way. So we're grateful for that. We're grateful someone's in the chair, Peter, to say how blessed we are, first American and Peruvian. We are so blessed to have Leo, and we're blessed and ask all of our listeners to pray for him today too.
This entire episode of Morning Air is on the Relevant Radio app. The Relevant Radio app is completely free and updated daily with fresh articles, podcasts, and prayers. Don't delay. Download the app today, and thanks for listening.